Hey, book lovers. Welcome to While I Read. I'm Katie Dodrell, and today I'm going to talk about all the books I read in November. So, if you're new here, welcome. On my channel, I produce one video a week where I talk about the books that I've read. Usually, I talk about mysteries and thrillers. Actually, this month, I also read some fantasy books that I'm going to discuss. November was not a great reading month for me. I read 6 books. Today I'm actually going to talk about 7 books because there was one book that I finished at the end of October and it didn't make it into my October reading wrap up. One of the books that I read this month, I think, is going to be one of my top 10 books for the year. It was really good. And then one of the books that I read this month is going to be one of my least favorite books of the year. I did not enjoy it. It may be a somewhat controversial choice, though. I think it's gotten some pretty good ratings on Goodreads, so you can see if you agree with me about that book. Of the books that I read, all but one of them were actually part of a series. Before I get started talking about the books, I just want to mention that, as always, all of the books that I talk about in this episode, you can find links to them in the description box down below. If you're interested in buying them and you click on the link I provide, I'll get a small percentage of the proceeds. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and I would appreciate you supporting my channel in that way if you like any of these books. So let's go ahead and start talking about all of the books that I read in November. So the first book that I want to tell you about is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. I actually read this book out loud to Sarah. We finished it in October, towards the end of October. It didn't make it onto my October reading list because I didn't think we would finish it as quickly as we did. The reason we finished it so quickly is because Sarah just loved it. And every night after I'd read a chapter, she would beg for me to read one more chapter and just a little bit more. So we finished it much more quickly than I thought that we would. So The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is about the 4 Pevensey children, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. They find a magic portal through a wardrobe into the land of Narnia. Narnia is a magical land with talking animals and fantastic creatures like centaurs and fawns and unicorns. But as the Pevensey children come into it for the first time, it is under the rule of the evil White Witch, who makes it where it is always winter but never Christmas in Narnia. But there is a prophecy that 4 children, sons of Adam and daughters of Eve, will come to Narnia and release it from the hold of the White Witch. So the Pevensey children are the children from the prophecy. So they have adventures in Narnia where they work with talking beavers and fawns and other creatures to fight against the White Witch. And of course, there is the noble lion Aslan, who is the true ruler of Narnia. So The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe can be enjoyed just as a fun fantasy story, but it's also an allegory for Christianity, with the lion Aslan representing Jesus Christ and the sacrifices that Jesus Christ made for mankind. As we were reading it, we talked to Sarah about both of these aspects, about the fantasy elements, the adventure elements that she loved, but also how Aslan was representative of Jesus Christ. So she really loved The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I'd read it many times before, but I loved getting to share it with Sarah. After we read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, we read the sequel to it, Prince Caspian. I should say that the books in the Narnia series, I consider The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to be the first book in the series. That's somewhat controversial. Often The Magician's Nephew is considered to be the first book. And technically it is, but The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was written first, and it's a better book. The Magician's Nephew is just weird to me. Probably we will read it to Sarah if she continues liking these books, but I don't know how much she'll like it. But anyway, we read Prince Caspian next. So in Prince Caspian, the four Pevensey children end up back in Narnia, but it turns out that it is hundreds of years since they were last there because time passes differently in Narnia. The Pevenseys are only, I think, about a year older than they were in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but hundreds of years have passed in Narnia. Their rule as kings and queens of Narnia is seen as some people by a myth, like it never happened. And some people don't believe that Aslan even exists. So at this point, the Telmarines are ruling in Narnia. There is a man called Miraz, who is the uncle of Caspian. Caspian is supposed to be the king, but Miraz had started serving as sort of Caspian's advisor, but he's pretty much taken over ruling Narnia. Caspian ends up meeting some of the old Narnians, the dwarves and the talking animals, and they want him to be their king. And so he is fighting against Miraz. So the Pevensey children arrive and they join Caspian in that fight. So to me, Prince Caspian is not one of the best books in the Narnia series, but it is good. Sarah enjoyed it. We read it pretty quickly. After we finished both The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and Prince Caspian, we watched the movies that came out. Actually, it's been nearly 20 years ago since those movies came out, which is insane to me. But The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is really good. Very faithful to the book. Very exciting. I love how it brings the characters to life. Prince Caspian was not as good to me. It's not as faithful to the book. And I can understand that because the book Prince Caspian is not as exciting. So I can understand wanting to add some things in. But to me, the movie version just changed too much from the book. It was too long. It just wasn't nearly as good. But Sarah did enjoy it. We've started the next book, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and I will tell you how she enjoys it and how we enjoy the movie. So the rest of the books that I read this month were in the mystery and thriller genre. So one that I read was The Stranger Diaries by Ellie Griffiths, and I really loved this book. So it's about a woman named Claire Cassidy who is an English teacher at a high school in England. And every year she teaches this short story by an author named R.M. Holland called The Stranger. And it's this really creepy short story. You get to read the short story in the book, and it's given to you in little snippets throughout the book. And so I really enjoyed reading this creepy gothic short story. Kind of reminded me of Edgar Allan Poe. And you don't find out the end of the short story until the end of the book. So I loved that. So another teacher at Claire's school is murdered, and it's actually one of Claire's best friends, her fellow English teacher. And next to the body, there is a note that is actually a line from the story, The Stranger. So there's a detective who comes in and starts investigating what happened. The detective's name, and I know I'm going to mispronounce this, but it's Harbinder Kaur. I don't know if I'm saying that right or not. But anyway, this detective is trying to figure out what happened. She's asking Claire a lot of questions. And so Claire starts looking back at her diary. She has kept a diary for years and years, and she starts looking back at her diaries to try to help jog her memory about certain things. And in her diary, she finds a note that says, "Hello, Claire, you don't know me," which just sends chills down my spine every time I think about it. Think about opening up your private diary and finding this note from someone that you don't know who it is. So Claire starts trying to figure out, what is this? What does this note have to do with what happened? So some of the chapters are from Claire's point of view. Some of the chapters are from the detective, Harbinder Kaur's point of view. Harbinder does suspect Claire. Claire knows Harbinder suspects her. And so they're both trying to figure out what happened. Of course, as the reader, you don't know, is Claire maybe an unreliable narrator? Did she actually kill her friend? And then Claire also has a teenage daughter named Georgie. And some of the chapters are from Georgie's point of view. So I really loved this book. It was really dark and creepy and fun. I liked the characters, especially especially Claire, I guess because she's an English teacher, I'm an English teacher, so I like reading about teachers. It was a really good, dark academia campus thriller type book. It was set around Halloween, and I read it around Halloween, so that made it even better. So after I read The Stranger Diaries, I really liked it, and I was looking for more books by Ellie Griffiths, and I stumbled across The Last Word. And I found out that the detective from The Stranger Diaries, Harbinger Core, Griffiths actually wrote a series around her. So The Stranger Diaries is the first one in the series. The Last Word is actually the fourth book in that series. I'm really bad about doing that, about not reading series in order. And that may have made The Last Word a little more confusing for me than it had to be, but it just seemed like the most interesting one in that series to me. So it is about a woman named Natalka and her boyfriend Benedict. And there's also a neighbor named Edwin, and they have a detective agency together. Natalka and Edwin are really the two partners in the detective agency. So Natalka is in, I believe, her 30s. Edwin is 84 years old. And there are a lot of funny things about him, like how he talks about he's the oldest detective and how he can just be invisible because of his age. So that's cool. And then Natalka is Ukrainian, and her mother, Valentina, has come to live with her and Benedict because of the war that's going on in Ukraine. I believe this book was set in like 2023. And Natalka also has a brother who is fighting in the war, a brother Dmitri. And so you hear a lot about that. So it was interesting to read about this current event that's going on and how this is a person who is actually personally affected by it. So there's been a murder in the area of a prominent local writer, and Natalka has been asked to look into it with her detective agency. And so they're looking into it. Edwin and Benedict end up going to this writer's retreat that the author who was killed had gone to. They're just trying to find out more information about her. And while they're there at the writer's retreat, another author turns up dead. So they're trying to investigate, and they're making some progress, but not a lot. So they end up getting help from Harbinger Cower, who they know from earlier cases that she has helped them with or that they've helped her with. So this book was good to me. I was interested in it because of the writing retreat aspect of it, because I like reading about writers. I liked it. I didn't like it as much as I liked the first book in the series, The Stranger Diaries, but I probably will end up at some point reading the other two middle books in this series that I haven't read yet. So the next series that I read a couple of books from this month was James Lovegrove's Sherlock Holmes series. So James Lovegrove is a modern author who is writing more books featuring Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. Again, I did not start at the beginning of the series. I started at about book 6 or so in the series, and that was Sherlock Holmes and the Christmas Demon. I started that because I just wanted to read a Christmas book, and I really enjoyed Sherlock Holmes and the Christmas Demon. So in this book, Sherlock and Watson are in London, and a woman named Eve Allerthorpe approaches them and tells them that she is an heiress. She's about to inherit a large amount of money. She lives at this old family estate in Yorkshire, but she's afraid that she is about to go insane. One of the stipulations of her being able to inherit this money that she's supposed to come into in a few days on her 21st birthday is that she is of sound mind. Her mother has actually taken her own life about a year ago at their family estate. And there was worry that her mother was insane. And so Eve has to be sane in order to inherit this money. So lately, some strange things have been happening. So when Eve was growing up, her mother would tell her stories of the Black Thuric, which is a Christmas demon. It reminded me of Krampus, which I've heard of. It's sort of the anti-Santa Claus. The Black Thuric is apparently a demon in Yorkshire. And so if children are bad, instead of toys, the Black Thoric will bring them little bundles of twigs. And there are also even darker stories that if they're really bad, he'll kidnap the children and he'll take them off to his cave and eat them. So Eve grew up hearing these stories from her mother, and she was terrified of the Black Thoric. Well, now, a few days before her 21st birthday, right around Christmas, Eve has started finding little bundles of twigs left for her, as if the Black Thoric is leaving them. She thinks that she has seen the Black Thoric outside the castle windows late one night. So she's very worried. She feels like she might be about to go insane, but she also wonders if someone is for some reason trying to perpetrate these things on her. So she asks Sherlock and Watson if they will come and stay at the family estate and try to figure out what's going on. So Sherlock and Watson do come, and it's really fun reading about them at this isolated estate. Eve's father and her other immediate family who lives there don't really want Sherlock and Watson there. They're not really happy that they're there. Then more members of the family come to celebrate Christmas, so the estate is full. It's got all the people there. It's got the servants who work for the Allerthorpe family. There does end up being another death while Sherlock and Watson are there that they have to investigate and figure out how it relates to what's going on with Eve. It was a good Christmas book because it had lots of descriptions of Christmas food and Christmas games and Christmas decorations, but it was also just a really good story. It felt to me like it could have been written by Arthur Conan Doyle. It had all of the elements of the Sherlock Holmes stories that I love. So I really enjoyed reading The Christmas Demon. After I read that one, I wanted to continue in this series. So I read the next book in the series, Sherlock Holmes and the Beast of the Stapletons. So this is actually a continuation of the story of The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is my absolute favorite Sherlock Holmes story. So, although I don't remember that story that well, I really need to go back and read The Hound of the Baskervilles again, but I do know that I loved that story. So, this story is set 5 years after the events of The Hound of the Baskervilles, where the demon hound was revealed to be just a dog that was raised to be evil, and its owner, who had also been trying to kill Lord Henry Baskerville, had been killed. So Henry Baskerville is living at his estate in Dartmoor. He is happily married and has a 3-year-old child. But then his wife Audrey's body is discovered, and it has been drained of blood. And so Sir Henry is convinced that someone is out to kill him and possibly his son. He is driven to the point of insanity by his grief and fear. And so Sherlock and Watson come to Dartmoor again to try to figure out what's going on. And it's believed that there is another monster there, even worse than the Hound of the Baskervilles that they defeated 5 years earlier. So this is a really exciting book. Again, I feel like it could have been written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. It's just in that perfect Sherlock Holmes style that I love. So I've really enjoyed The Beast of the Stapletons. So the last book I'll talk about that I read in November is The Blue Hour by Paula Hawkins. And I did not enjoy this book at all. This is probably the reason why I didn't read more books in November, because it took me forever to read this book. And honestly, I don't know why I finished it. I guess the redeeming factor is the writing is beautiful. Paula Hawkins does just have very beautiful lyrical prose. I did like the setting of the book. So it's set on this isolated Scottish island, and this artist named Vanessa lived there. And she lived there pretty much alone. She did have a companion named Grace who lived there some of the time. And so when Vanessa died, she surprisingly left her art to her nemesis, this man who she had fought with for many, many years. And so the book is about this art curator named Becker who works for the family of the man that Vanessa Chapman, left her art collection to. It's very confusing to describe to me. So the book is about Becker trying to figure out where all of this art came from. There's a mystery at the beginning because one of her sculptures that she made, it's discovered that a bone that she used in it that they believed was an animal bone is actually a human bone. And this is extremely disturbing, not only because, human bones are disturbing, but also because Vanessa's ex-husband, Julian, had vanished after a visit to her isolated island. And some people think she murdered him and that maybe that bone is actually his bone. So the story is about Becker trying to categorize all of her art, trying to figure out, was this really a human bone? What are we going to do about this? And it also has some chapters that are from the point of view of Vanessa herself as she lives on this island, and from the point of view of Grace, who was her longtime companion who looked after Vanessa during her final illness, but who Vanessa really didn't leave a lot to. Surprisingly, she didn't leave her art collection to Grace. But at the end, it just went off the rails. It had an ambiguous ending, which I get it. It's literary fiction. I'm an English major. I can read and appreciate literary fiction, but this ending was just too ambiguous for me. I felt like the author was kind of cheating at the way she ended the book. So I did not enjoy The Blue Hour. I read The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins and didn't enjoy that one either. So I don't think I'm going to be reading anything else by Paula Hawkins. So that's it for the books that I read in November. Please comment if you read any of these books and what you thought of them. I'd love to hear from you if you read The Blue Hour by Paula Hawkins and hear what you think of it, because I know a lot of people loved it. So thank you for watching. If you like this video and want more book recommendations and reviews, please subscribe to my channel. Now, you go take a nap while I read.